It's part 11, and we're working on the reticular activating system on page 452. It's depicted for us right here. So there is what is referred to as the formation, and then there is the system itself, which includes the whole brain. Okay, so we have this stimulation here. Let's come back a couple pages where they actually make that distinction here between what is the formation, which is certain aspects of the brain that you can read about here, the reticular formation. Okay, it's sort of part of the brainstem, and then from this we have the reverberating circuit that goes out to the brain, and we have the reticular activating system that then activates the brain and keeps us alert and aware and excitable. Okay, so there are people who in fact utilize this aspect, and they go to a cafeteria. I had an undergraduate school. I had a roommate who he was pre-med, and he went to the cafeteria to study all the time because he liked the sound and he liked the bright light of it, and that kept him alert, and somehow he was able to filter out everything. And people who have a really healthy reticular activating system, who are well focused on their activities, they're actually going to filter out and disregard 99% of what's available. Okay, so that there is potentially a very powerful filtering system that this is about. On the other hand, there are people who have, how shall I say, not the greatest filtering system, and they get distracted easily. In which case, I would recommend that you don't go to a cafeteria to study, that instead you go to a neutral space that in which you can actually maybe listen to Baroque music and have not too bright a light, but adequate light to read well and to draw and to do the things you need to do to study, and then perhaps even have a beverage and so on, so that you can sort of sustain yourself in that environment. So the reticular activating system potentially is what keeps us awake, alert, excited to do what it is that we're doing, but also filters us from things that would be a distraction, and that most of us are able to utilize that system, and that we're able to focus and get everything done. Okay, so there we have that particular system. We're going to go on to brain waves now, and here we have brain waves. Okay, we have alpha waves, beta waves, theta waves, deltas, and this just represents what is, how shall I say, different levels of experience in most cases. While they talk about, at least in sort of the Western mind, alpha waves as idling, one could also say that it is meditative and that it's actually quite rich, calm, relaxed state of wakefulness. But in fact, if you get really relaxed, you can do a lot. I once watched a Olympic sprint in which the previous year's gold medalist, or the previous 4 years ago, Olympic champion was the sort of the announcer for the race, and he pointed out that he pointed at the winner of the race, the current race, who was going very suddenly much faster than everybody else. They all came out of the blocks more or less at the same speed, and nobody seemed to be out ahead. And then suddenly this person sort of dropped an inch or two into a more relaxed position and suddenly went much, much faster. And the former gold medalist said, "Look at him relax," which is not something that comes to mind when you're running a sprint. And I used to have a coach who used to always tell me to relax, and I wanted to yell back, "Coach, I'm running." But at any rate, that's sort of the idea here, is that if you can relax and enter into your ideal stride and ideal breathing system, that you can actually work very smoothly and have the best result. So I would submit to you that people who are capable of alpha states are actually capable of doing very good work. Those of us who are not quite that relaxed or in beta wave state, this is a very busy, mentally intense type of activity. If you're doing a math problem and maybe you're not, well, there might be some people who are so in love with math that it actually relaxes them. But at any rate, the idea here is that beta waves are busy mind type of activity. Usually you drop to alpha right before sleep, and then you, as the adult at any rate, enters theta waves in mild sleep, going from alpha to theta, and then delta waves in really deep sleep, or in, how shall I say, anesthesia. Okay, so these are different states of being. It's possible for children to actually be completely awake and in theta wave state. So, there's sort of, how shall I say, a difficult zone between wakefulness and sleep with children of a certain age, maybe 3 or 4 years old, maybe 3 to 5, somewhere through there. But I have seen children right around 4 years of age actually fall asleep with their eyes wide open. So the possibility of being at sort of a transitional stage is possible with early childhood. And I would submit to you that also there's probably people who are advanced senior citizens who are sort of re-entering that zone of possibilities where the difference between wakefulness and sleep is a little bit fuzzy or transitional. But at any rate, the idea here is that we have these various states. You can take your time and read about that and learn more about it. Here we have somebody in a sleep lab, and or it could just be testing the electroencephalography, the EEG brainwaves for this individual. There might be some other tests going on besides sleep. But at any rate, they give us a little readout here in terms of how does alpha look, how does beta look, how does theta and delta waves look. Okay, so the busiest and shortest waves and everything is going to be the beta waves. Alpha is a little bit slower, more uniform, more relaxed waves. Here we have theta waves, which are very much slower, have slightly higher amplitudes. And then finally we get delta waves, which have the highest amplitudes and are the longest waves of all. So these usually reflect the deepest sleep states. Right here, there are people who oftentimes, because they've aged, they're not getting sleep at these delta wave levels, which are the most productive realms of sleep. But you'll see about that in the Matthew Walker workup. He discusses some ideas about sleep that I need you to know. Okay. So also people who do biofeedback, you might be familiar with that. People who have to, especially in psychology applications, overcome phobias and so on, or they need to address other aspects of personality issues, is they need to enter into a alpha state and become relaxed with things that are otherwise making them nervous or anxious. Okay, so we learn how to do that through sometimes the use of these electroencephalograph machines. This kind of work is going on at Harvard through a friend of mine that I'm familiar with, Saki Santarelli. Okay, so moving right along, then the next thing that we get to here is the idea of consciousness. Consciousness is, how shall I say, something that you sometimes measure as nurses. You want to know if your patient is, first of all, if they're awake, and if they're aware of things around them, if they know what their name is, they know what part of the day they're in, they know what day it is, and they know the location, maybe that they're at a particular hospital and that they understand the situation that they're in. So, there's all of these different aspects of alertness and consciousness. Here we're actually considering something a little bit more clinical, in which we have the kind of alertness that I've just described and that you can measure by certain questions. Then there's a drowsiness. The individual is becoming a little sleepy. There may be some drug effects from whatever they have on board with their medications, and so they might actually be entering a stupor, and then finally they might just pass out, and so they're not present at all in a conscious way. So there are these different levels of consciousness. Consciousness itself is described as a higher ordering of brain parts during consciousness, so it's not something that we can so specifically locate in the brain, although there are certain processes within consciousness that are a little bit easier to locate, although they differ from one individual to another.